Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus commands. How are we doing following this commandment? I feel that we are in a most fragile space here in the United States. I feel that we are more divided than ever. And we don't have to reach too far to find someone to disagree or argue with. We can just simply walk outside our door or get in our car or jump on social media. Everyone seems to be disagreeing with everyone. And everything seems to be politicized these days, from sports to food to healthcare to school to colors to, of course, COVID and mask wearing and social distancing. It is enough to make us feel frustrated and sick and depressed, and if we let it, it can get the best of us. Wouldn't it be great if we could just lock ourselves away for several months at a time just so we don't have to deal with it? And then we encounter this story of Jesus telling us that the most important commandment that we can follow as people of faith is to love God and to love our neighbor as ourselves. That is really hard. That was really difficult before all this, before COVID and it being an election year and a delicate economy. And now with quarantining, our neighbor is not just the person living next door with the political sign that we may not like in their yard, or the long-lost college friend that we found on social media that we can decide to unfriend. Our neighbor may very well be our children, our partner, our parents, as we may find ourselves in such close quarters with them. And it's driving us nuts. Love our neighbor as ourselves? That is really, really hard right now. Do we have to? And if so, how? I'll admit, just watching or reading the news is enough to send me over the edge. I get angry, my eyes get big, I'm unable to articulate myself, and the only thing that comes out is, Wah! I lose myself. I lose my humanity. And I give thanks for my faith that grounds me in something larger than myself. Our faith provides us with a framework of healthy practices like prayer and breathing and communion and commandments that remind us to love our neighbor, and sacred stories that remind us that we all have bad days and they call us back into center. One challenging story in particular that comes to mind is that one in Matthew of the Canaanite woman. You know, the one who chases after Jesus because she's desperate to have him heal her daughter, only to be told by Jesus that her problems are not his problems. The writer in Matthew is trying to make the point that this woman is completely outside of God's care. She's not only a Gentile, she belongs to the most worthless, most hated group of all. She is in essence a dog. But the Canaanite woman doesn't bristle at the put down. Instead, in a mic drop moment, she turns it back on Jesus. And she says, "We may be dogs, Jesus, but remember, even loving masters give their dogs table scraps to eat." Her words call Jesus out of his funk and back to center. This encounter calls every character and hero back from brunching on the abyss of complacency, of irresponsibility, of distrust and privilege. And it calls us back into the responsibility of caring for our neighbor. At the core of our existence is the call to be a good human and have respect for life and honor everyone's dignity. Dignity implies that each person is worthy of honor and respect for who they are, not just for what they can do. In other words, human dignity cannot be earned and it cannot be taken away. The Latin word for dignity means worthiness. And because creation is made in the image of God, it is most certainly worthy. As the psalm celebrates, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. While we are absolutely believe that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, there are too many moments that we have forgotten that so too is our neighbor. We all lose our way. We all have bad days and bad moments, and we can give thanks for our faith stories, which brings us back into center, reminding us that we have a responsibility to respect the dignity of our neighbor, our responsibility to cultivate a world where the intrinsic value of creation is honored, and that we follow a God that commands this. But honoring someone's dignity is a choice. Loving ourselves, loving our neighbor, and loving God is a choice. As Episcopal priest Carter Hayward writes, love is a choice, not simply or necessarily a rational choice, but rather a willingness to be present to others without pretense or guide. Love is a conversation to humanity, a willingness to participate with others in the healing of a broken world and broken lives. Love is the choice to experience life as a member of the human family, a partner in the dance of life. Every time we lean toward love, exercising respect and compassion and listening, we lean into our humanity. When we honor someone's dignity, we are choosing to love God. What is interesting in this particular story in Mark, which is different than the other parallel stories in the Gospels, is that this story is about finding common ground. The scribe, who was part of a different religious and political persuasion, didn't come to test Jesus as it is portrayed in the other gospel narratives. He came to engage. And the scribe and Jesus find common ground. They agree that love is the most important commandment. It is what their faith is built upon, and it is what will bring about the kingdom of heaven. Searching for common ground with those who are different than us takes work. It takes intention and showing up. It means hanging out with people that don't look or always act or think like us. And let's face it, it is much easier to dismiss someone as crazy, as irrational, or even as Antifa than it is to hold space to engage. It is much easier if we can create a scapegoat because it bypasses any work that we have to do, like processing or growing or articulating or being held accountable. It is a choice to do this work. And it doesn't mean agreeing. The benefits are in the journey, not necessarily the end result. While I attended the Ecumenical Institute in Switzerland, I studied with over 40 people from over 30 countries about Christian ecumenism. You can imagine that there were definitely some disagreements. But the amazing outcomes of learning and living for several months with a diverse group of people wasn't to end up agreeing. It was about building friendship and respect and learning to listen and building perspectives outside of my own and to consider sacred stories from another cultural context. It was not always easy, and we didn't always get along. But we committed ourselves to worshiping daily together, and we sang together, and we prayed the Lord's Prayer together. We learned to honor the dignity of each other, and in doing so, we loved one another. In a time where there are feelings that are so divisive and frankly just nuts, as people of faith, what are we going to choose to do? Will we exercise a spirit of compassion? Will we lean into another perspective and listen and ask questions and exercise respect? And even if we don't find common ground, can we see our common humanity? Can we remember that anger and hostility are no match for love? Can we be a witness to each other's dignity and therefore a witness for God? May we choose love. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. Amen.